Space has become a hotly contested battlefield, and I don't mean that just metaphorically. Space stations with cannons mounted on them, satellites with lasers, missiles for destroying targets, and missiles for intercepting them have literally been not only envisioned, but also constructed and launched into orbit by the great powers of the world. Some have even been fired. And although all at war has not begun to take place between nations in space, countries have prepared for the eventuality of violent conflict above our atmosphere for decades. They have designed guns and contingencies, and even the occasional doomsday weapon. Would you like to take a look at what's being created? Today, as we discuss the past, present, and possible future of military weapons in space, in the hopes that it will give us some insight into how a space-based war between nations might go, and what needs to happen to avoid it. From as early as the 5th century BCE, writers imagined vehicles or structures capable of entering space with weapons capable of raining down destruction. Hindu texts spoke of Vimana, flying chariots or palaces with flying saucer-like qualities that transported their occupants into the heavens and could destroy entire cities with their weapons. In the 2nd century, Syrian author Lucian of Samosita wrote a short novel containing such elements as traveling into space and an interplanetary war between denizens of the sun and the moon. But it has only been in the last century or so that these imaginings could actually be shaped into a reality. As the first liquid propellant rocket began to be launched in 1926, suddenly it became possible to reach higher as a species than we had ever done before, to not just enter the skies, but to pass beyond them. And of course, the technology was almost immediately turned to militaristic purposes. Nazi Germany quickly saw the advantages of rocketry and began developing their V-2 rockets, which skimmed the edge of space, reaching 80 kilometers before raining down destruction from the sky. Fortunately, this breakthrough came too late in the war to change how it ended, but V-2 rockets became at least the progenitor of the first human space weapons. They may have only skimmed space themselves, but their descendant, the intercontinental ballistic missile of 1959, was able to enter space truly. It's fortunate that the war ended when it did, as Nazi scientists were considering other, more imaginative weapons that could be used from space. Some of what they were contemplating seemed the sort of thing you might watch in a James Bond. As early as 1929, Hermann Oberth, a Transylvanian Saxon-born physicist and engineer who later became one of the founding fathers of German rocketry, was chalking up designs for a 100-meter-wide concave mirror that could be placed in space to concentrate sunlight into a single destructive point. This sun gun, sun and giver idea, was picked up by German scientists who dreamed of making the superweapon a reality. They hoped that its power would allow them to burn entire cities with its heat. Again, fortunately, the war ended before that particular vision could be made a reality. The birth of rockets had a twofold effect on modern space conflict. The first was the increased development of further and further ranging rockets, which gained increasingly powerful payloads, accumulating in the nuclear weapons the superpowers of the world hold on standby today. But the second was the development of the more commercial use of space. As Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite, was launched in 1957, humanity began to realize that space could be used for more than just a place to fire weapons from. Since then, we have launched over 8,000 satellites into orbit around Earth. They contribute hugely to modern society. Through satellite guidance, our phones can know where we are currently and can guide us to any destination by the shortest route. We can communicate in an instant with people on the other side of the world. With this, economies flourished and nations began to realize how devastating it would be if we ever lost them unexpectedly. And so, a new front opened up in space conflict, the satellite war. Nations began trying to figure out how to protect their own satellites while inhibiting the satellites of others, should the need ever arise. Different nations took different approaches to this. The Soviet Union in the early 1960s sought to protect their own space interests, while threatening others by launching the secretive Almaz space station. This manned space station was unlike any other in history that we know of, as it came with a built-in cannon attached to its front-forward belly, capable of firing thousands of rounds a minute. It wasn't perfect. Recoil on such a powerful weapon was a big issue for the whole space station, and it had to be aimed manually by turning the entire space station to point at its target. But this weapon was actually tested in space in 1975, firing about 20 shells at a gas canister target. The result of the test is classified, so we don't exactly know how it went, but a few years later, Project Almaz was scrapped on the grounds of being too expensive and inefficient, so you can draw your conclusions yourself. However, one of the greatest weapons of satellites is not in their destructive power, but in their ability to gain information. Satellites can capture footage of events on the ground in incredible detail, as well as having the ability to listen in to stray signals for espionage purposes. While in 1966, the United Nations General Assembly signed into international law the Outer Space Treaty, making it illegal to place weapons of mass destruction into orbit and encouraging the peaceful use of space, using satellites to spy on your enemies appears to have been deemed fair game. Each superpower makes use of satellites to conduct reconnaissance on sites of importance. About 1/5 of all satellites are military-owned and are used for this purpose. Many, such as the large American-owned Orion satellites, can hoover up all the telephone calls and signals that telephone towers radiate into space using their massive 100-meter diameter antennae. Since phone calls stopped running through wires and started being broadcast wirelessly, it has become much easier for military organizations to intercept every single communication. Tapping into wires is a thing of the past. Your privacy likewise. Naturally, countermeasures to this have started to arise, as nations and groups object to their privacy being invaded like this. An interesting modern-day facet of this can be seen at play in the Russian-Ukraine war right now. Satellites play a powerful role in modern conflict, allowing military forces to track enemy combatants and relay that information back to units on the ground. However, this is much less effective in Ukraine ever since large swaths of the battlefield became subject to GPS jammers. GPS jammers work by flooding the bandwidths used by GPS satellites with noisy radio signals of their own, drowning out the vital positioning information or spoofing it. Attack drones have played a prominent part in the Ukraine conflict. If you convince GPS that your city is miles away from its actual location, drones will attack the wrong site, getting confused about where they are supposed to go. This is an actual technology that is being employed in a war setting today. It represents space technology being used as an asset in conventional ground warfare. That said, at the time of writing, no space war where a space target attacked another space target has ever taken place. But that's not to say that nations are not preparing for the eventuality. America and Russia have been developing anti-satellite missiles or ASATs since the 1950s. Some have even been fired. The U.S. has launched only one test ASAT, which took down a failing commercial satellite in 1985 using infrared heat seeking as guidance and then crashing into it at 24,000 kilometers an hour to destroy it, the kinetic energy alone being enough to knock the satellite out of the sky. This is it for today's video. What do you think of our video? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more future updates. Thanks for watching.